The golden glow of television fills American living rooms, but beneath the laughter and innocence lies something darker. Episodes pulled from air without warning, scripts rewritten in fear, tapes destroyed or locked away. Why were these stories buried for decades? Tonight we uncover 12 banned television episodes from the 1960s that vanished into the shadows of censorship and only resurfaced years later. Number 12. Star Trek: Plato's Stepchildren, 1968. Star Trek was never afraid of controversy. It dared to explore politics, morality, and human nature. But in 1968, it crossed a line that television was not ready for. In the episode, Plato's stepchildren, Captain Kirk and Lieutenant Uhura, are forced to kiss under telekinetic control. It became one of the earliest televised interracial kisses in America. The scene was meant to challenge prejudice, but NBC executives panicked. Some Southern affiliates threatened to pull the broadcast entirely, fearing viewer outrage. Sponsors worried about public backlash. The network tried to film alternate versions where the kiss did not happen, but William Shatner deliberately sabotaged the takes, ensuring the kiss stayed. After its initial broadcast, the episode disappeared from rerun rotation for years. Some stations refused to air it until the 1970s. Critics later hailed it as groundbreaking, yet at the time, both actors faced hate mail and network silence. When the episode resurfaced in syndication, it became a symbol of progress. Star Trek had not just told a story about tolerance, it had lived it. What was once forbidden became a cultural milestone, proving that sometimes the bravest act on television is simply telling the truth. Number 11. The Twilight Zone, The Encounter, 1964. The Twilight Zone was television's mirror to the human soul, but even Rod Serling's haunting imagination could not save one story from erasure. In 1964, CBS aired The Encounter, starring George Takei and Neville Brand. It told of a Japanese-American gardener and a bitter World War II veteran trapped in an attic with a samurai sword, haunted by guilt and hate. The episode delved into racism, revenge, and the scars of war, but critics accused it of perpetuating anti-Japanese stereotypes. Veteran groups protested, claiming it insulted soldiers. CBS panicked. After its single broadcast, the network ordered the episode banned from syndication. It remained unseen for nearly half a century. Takei himself called it one of his most difficult roles, saying the story's intent was misunderstood. In truth, The Encounter was a psychological study about two men consumed by the ghosts of history. Yet in the fearful atmosphere of the 1960s, networks avoided anything that hinted at moral ambiguity. For decades, the episode was considered lost. Bootleg copies circulated among collectors until CBS finally restored and aired it again in 2019. What had once been silenced became a reminder that censorship often says more about the censors than the art itself. Number 10. The Alfred Hitchcock Hour, The Sorcerer's Apprentice, 1962. The Alfred Hitchcock Hour was famous for its dark twists and chilling morality tales. But one story proved too disturbing even for Hitchcock's audience. The Sorcerer's Apprentice told of a simple-minded young man manipulated by a carnival magician into committing murder. It ended with an unforgettable image of a woman sawn in half for real. NBC executives were horrified. They declared the episode too gruesome for television. Sponsors threatened to pull out, fearing public outrage from families expecting suspense, not brutality. The episode was pulled before its scheduled broadcast in 1962. Viewers never saw it, and it became a whispered legend among Hitchcock fans. For years, no official copy existed. Critics debated whether it was a myth until collectors unearthed a print decades later. When it finally resurfaced in the 1980s, its violence seemed tame by modern standards. Yet the fear it caused in 1962 revealed how fragile network tolerance had been. The Sorcerer's Apprentice became more than a story about murder. It became a story about control, about what television dared not show in a world terrified of moral decay. And like its doomed protagonist, it reminded viewers that innocence and horror often walk hand in hand. Number 9. The Dick Van Dyke Show, The Sick Boy and the Sitter, 1961. The Dick Van Dyke Show was the heart of American sitcom comfort. It was witty, family-friendly, and filled with warmth. But one episode shocked censors for daring to break an invisible rule of television decency. The Sick Boy and the Sitter centered on Rob and Laura Petrie struggling between parenthood and adult social life. In the story, Laura refuses to attend a party because their son is ill. Rob insists it will be fine. The argument that follows felt real and raw. It hinted that marriage was not always perfect. It suggested that good parents sometimes made selfish choices. That realism was enough to terrify network executives. CBS feared the episode would upset family audiences by showing moral conflict inside a sitcom household. Early sponsors labeled it too dark for comedy. It aired once in 1961 and was swiftly removed from rerun packages for years. Some local stations refused to air it at all, believing it undermined the image of the perfect American family. When it resurfaced, later critics praised it for honesty. It was one of the first sitcoms to treat domestic life as complex rather than glossy. In hindsight, the controversy seemed absurd, but in the innocent era of the 1960s, showing flawed parents was radical. The episode's temporary disappearance proved that even laughter was not safe from censorship when truth hit too close to home. Number 8. The Avengers. A Touch of Brimstone, 1966. The Avengers was one of Britain's most stylish exports. With its suave agents and surreal villains, it defined cool, but in 1966 it went too far. The episode A Touch of Brimstone featured Emma Peel infiltrating a secret society of aristocrats who called themselves the Hellfire Club. Their decadent rituals shocked audiences. When the episode aired in Britain, the imagery caused outrage. In America, it never even reached the screen. ABC executives banned it outright after viewing advance reels. They feared public outcry over what they saw as indecent behavior and violent overtones. The British press called it disgraceful, and moral watchdogs accused the show of glamorizing corruption. Behind the scenes, producers defended the story as satire. It was meant to mock the hypocrisy of the upper class. Yet the network panic was so severe that the episode was pulled from circulation entirely. For years, it was whispered about by fans who had seen early copies. Decades later, when it finally resurfaced on home video, it was hailed as a masterpiece of subversive television. The Hellfire imagery would later inspire storylines in comics and films. What was once seen as scandalous became iconic. A Touch of Brimstone proved that television's greatest sin in the 1960s was being too far ahead of its time. Number 7. The Andy Griffith Show. Opie's Ill-Gotten Gain, 1963. The Andy Griffith Show was the definition of wholesome Americana, but even Mayberry was not immune to controversy. In the episode Opie's Ill-Gotten Gain, the story revolved around a moral lesson gone wrong. Opie receives an award for good grades that he never actually earned. The situation spirals into guilt and confusion. At first glance, it was harmless, but Southern school boards complained that the plot mocked the education system. Others argued it encouraged children to cheat. CBS executives panicked under pressure from advertisers who demanded its removal. The episode aired only once and was quietly pulled from syndication for nearly a decade. Behind the camera, the writers were furious. They insisted the episode was about honesty and forgiveness, not rebellion. But the wave of complaints was relentless. Even fan letters poured in condemning the show for corrupting youth. In a climate obsessed with moral purity, no network dared defend nuance. When the episode returned years later, it was met with confusion. Younger audiences could not understand why it had ever been banned. Today, it stands as proof that censorship often misses the point entirely. What was meant as a story of conscience became a symbol of how fear and overreaction shaped the television landscape of the 1960s. Number 6. The Beverly Hillbillies. The Clamp It Strike Oil Again, 1963. The Beverly Hillbillies was one of television's most beloved comedies. It made audiences laugh across America with its fish, out-of-water humor and innocent charm. But in 1963, one episode crossed a line that few expected. The Clamp It Strike Oil Again was meant as a light-hearted sequel to the show's pilot. Yet its satirical take on greed and corporate corruption sent network executives into panic. In the story, the Clampett family accidentally signs away their oil rights to a manipulative banker who uses false promises of charity and progress. What began as a simple farce turned into a biting commentary on exploitation and class hypocrisy. The script contained scenes where rich investors mocked the poor and portrayed banks as predators feeding on the innocent. In the tense political climate of the early 1960s, this was dangerous territory. CBS executives quickly grew uneasy. Sponsors connected to oil and finance industries objected to being portrayed negatively. Pressure mounted behind the scenes, and the network decided to bury the episode before it could air nationally. Only a few local affiliates broadcast it once before it disappeared entirely from rerun circulation. Cast members later recalled the confusion. The show was supposed to be harmless, yet suddenly it had been accused of promoting anti-capitalist propaganda. For years, the episode existed only in rumor until it surfaced on bootleg VHS tapes in the 1980s. When fans finally saw it, they were shocked not by its content, but by how mild it seemed compared to modern satire. Today, the lost episode is a reminder that even comedies were not safe from censorship when they touch the raw nerves of power and politics. In a world obsessed with wealth, the Clampett strike oil again dared to ask who was really striking it rich and who was being played for a fool. Number 5. The Outer Limits. The Forms of Things Unknown, 1964. The Outer Limits was the darker cousin to The Twilight Zone, a series that twisted science fiction into psychological terror. But in 1964, one episode went too far, even for its devoted audience. The Forms of Things Unknown told the story of two women who murder a cruel man and then stumble upon a strange machine capable of bending time and death itself. The episode was haunting, poetic, and deeply unsettling. Its tone was far more avant-garde than anything television had attempted before. Directors used fractured camera angles, eerie soundscapes, and surreal editing to create an almost dreamlike sense of dread, but NBC executives were horrified. They considered it too disturbing for a primetime audience. The biggest controversy came from its ambiguous ending, where reality seemed to collapse and morality was left undefined. Critics of the time accused it of nihilism and immorality. Religious groups demanded its removal, claiming it mocked divine order. Under mounting pressure, NBC pulled the episode from repeat airings and ordered its footage archived indefinitely. Behind the scenes, the creative team defended the episode as art not. Blasphemy. The director Gerd Oswald had poured his obsession with the fragility of reality into every frame. But the more he defended it, the deeper the panic grew. For decades, it became one of the show's most sought-after lost works, until restored prints appeared in syndication during the 1980s. When modern audiences finally saw it, they hailed it as visionary. The Forms of Things Unknown had predicted the psychological horror movement long before it existed. It became a cult favorite for those who saw censorship not as protection, but as proof that art had the power to disturb and awaken. Number 4. Bonanza. The Wish, 1962. Bonanza was the beating heart of classic Western television. It was heroic, patriotic, and family-oriented. But in 1962, an episode titled The Wish challenged those ideals in a way the network could not tolerate. The story followed Hoss Cartwright after he encounters a wandering preacher who claims that heaven is reserved for certain races. The episode tackled prejudice head-on, portraying the preacher's hateful rhetoric as poison that divides the frontier town. Hoss rejects the message and defends unity and compassion. But when the script reached NBC's standards department, it triggered a storm of protest. Religious organizations and Southern affiliates accused it of blasphemy and moral subversion. Executives hesitated. They wanted Bonanza to stay safe and marketable, not political. The controversy exploded when sponsors began threatening to pull funding if the episode aired. Despite its powerful message of equality, NBC decided to shelve it indefinitely. Only a handful of viewers saw it during its initial run before it vanished from public circulation for nearly 30 years. Writers and cast members were furious. Michael Landon later revealed that the episode had been one of the most meaningful stories ever produced for the series, but no amount of protest could change the network's decision. The master tape was quietly locked away and forgotten. When it finally reappeared decades later, audiences were stunned by how progressive it had been. The Wish was not an attack on faith, but on hatred disguised as faith. It exposed how censorship often silences the very voices trying to heal. Today it stands as one of Bonanza's bravest and most tragic episodes. Proof that telling the truth can be the riskiest thing a storyteller can do. Number 3. Gilligan's Island. The Forbidden City of Gold, 1966. Gilligan's Island was supposed to be harmless fun, a cast of castaways on a tropical island getting into silly trouble week after week. But in 1966, one episode went too far. The Forbidden City of Gold followed the castaways as they stumbled upon the ruins of an ancient civilization filled with idols and curses. It should have been another lighthearted adventure. Instead, it became a network nightmare. The problem was not the plot, but the tone writers had filled. The story with dark themes about greed, superstition, and human sacrifice. The idols in the episode resembled real religious symbols from Southeast Asia, and that sparked international outrage even before it aired. Foreign press accused the show of mocking sacred traditions. Back home, CBS executives received piles of letters from religious groups warning of spiritual blasphemy. In a panic, the network pulled the episode before its broadcast in several markets. Those that did air it only did so once. The studio refused to include it in rerun packages and ordered the reels shelved. For decades, fans believed it was an urban legend lost in the vaults. When the episode finally resurfaced in the late 1980s, collectors were shocked by how strange it was. The tone was eerie and the humor almost vanished. The usually cheerful cast seemed trapped in a nightmare, rather than a comedy. Today, the Forbidden City of Gold stands as proof that even the silliest sitcom could accidentally tap into something far darker than intended. The laughter faded, replaced by unease and curiosity over what else might have been hidden from the world. Number 2. The Flintstones. A Mother's Love, 1964. The Flintstones was America's favorite Stone Age family and one of the first animated shows to attract both children and adults. But in 1964, Hanna-Barbera produced an episode that shocked even their loyal sponsors. A Mother's Love was meant to be a sentimental story about Wilma and Betty trying to adopt an orphaned child in Bedrock, yet it touched a nerve that no cartoon had ever dared before. The episode included scenes of emotional despair and subtle criticism of adoption laws and bureaucracy. It showed the two women facing rejection after rejection while trying to give a child a home. Networks worried that the tone was too serious for a cartoon and that it questioned government authority. When preview screenings made executives uncomfortable, the order came swiftly to pull it from rotation. A few local stations aired it once before it was completely withdrawn. Parents' groups wrote angry letters claiming the story made children sad and confused. For decades, it was considered a missing episode. Animation historians speculated that it was destroyed to preserve the show's image as a cheerful family comedy. When it finally resurfaced in a private collection in the early 2000s, it stunned viewers with its humanity. A Mother's Love was not controversial because it was offensive, but because it was too real. It dared to show pain inside a cartoon world built on laughter. The story reminded audiences that even Bedrock had a heart that beat with the struggles of real people. Its long ban became one of television's most tragic censorships of empathy itself. Number 1. The Twilight Zone. The Shelter, 1961. Few shows captured fear like The Twilight Zone. It reflected the paranoia of its age and held a mirror to the human condition. But in 1961, The Shelter hit too close to home. The episode followed a suburban neighborhood during a nuclear panic. When a missile warning blares out, neighbors turn on each other, fighting for space inside one man's fallout shelter. It was one of Rod Serling's most intense scripts, a brutal examination of human selfishness under pressure. Yet CBS was terrified. Airing during the height of Cold War tension, it made viewers confront a horrifying truth: that the real threat was not the bomb, but each other. Some affiliates refused to broadcast it, claiming it could cause panic. Others labeled it anti-American propaganda. Sponsors demanded edits to remove dialogue that criticized blind patriotism and fear-driven violence. Serling refused to change a word. The standoff ended with the episode airing only once, before being pulled from syndication for nearly 2 decades. Behind the scenes, Serling defended his work, saying television had a duty to confront the moral cost of survival. When it finally returned years later, The Shelter was hailed as a masterpiece. Critics called it one of the most realistic portrayals of Cold War hysteria ever filmed. Its message remains timeless. Fear divides, compassion unites. The episode proved that censorship often shields not the weak, but the guilty, who fear seeing their reflection in the mirror of truth. From forbidden kisses to lost comedies, these vanished episodes tell one story. The truth was never what frightened television. It was honesty, it was courage, and it was change. Which of these lost episodes would you risk airing again today? Let us know in the comments. Subscribe for more hidden histories from the vaults of classic television.